Breaking news out here in Broward County, and I mean breaking. We just got this. Broward County now admits they submitted their recount numbers 2 minutes late, and thus, under the rules, the results apparently will not count. I want to tell you exactly what that means. The entire developments, the drama, the protests, the counting, everything that's been going on behind me the last few days, according to this breaking news tonight, that would be for nothing, because the state is going to use the original vote totals while this manual recount proceeds under state law. Can't make it up. Now, while the situation here in Florida gets more chaotic by the day, and we're going to have more on that throughout our hour, we're not ignoring, of course, a lot of the national developments. The blue wave here is clearly growing as an epic rebuke of Donald Trump. Today, another Democrat flipping a Republican-held seat. This is Jared Golden beating an incumbent Republican in Maine. And as of tonight, that means Democrats have solidified a net gain of 35 seats in the House, the most in 4 decades. And that number itself could continue to grow as this counting continues. The party, meanwhile, debating how to go forward. And Congresswoman Marcia Fudge emerging as a potential challenger to Nancy Pelosi's bid to be Speaker once again. She said she's been overwhelmed by support she's getting. And Pelosi responded today with this.
The election were held today on the House floor, so you have the votes to be elected Speaker.
Yes.
What do you make of Marcia Fudge trying to challenge you, or considering challenge?
Say to everybody, come on in, the water's warm.
I'm joined now by Democratic Congresswoman Schakowsky of Illinois. She's backing Pelosi. She's on the leadership team as Chief Deputy Whip, as well as David Jolly, a former Republican congressman from Florida. Congresswoman, I'm going to go to you in 1 second, but given this breaking news, Congressman Jolly, your view of your great state not counting the Broward recount on a 2-minute technicality.
You know, you can't make it up. I think after this, we're going to have to visit election reform here in Florida. But what it all comes down to for Senator Nelson is whether or not the undercounts in Broward hold enough votes for him. That's really what it's going to come down to. We'll see during the hand recount in the next 48 hours.
Congresswoman Schakowsky, I have my good news for you is we didn't book you to talk about Florida's problems, and I'm not going to ask you about them at this juncture.
Okay.
But I will ask you about this leadership team. Many people in the Democratic Party excited about this 4-decade level historic endorsement from the American public over a 7-point margin. But as you know, a debate about Nancy Pelosi. What is the argument for her to be Speaker once again and not say, as some other Democrats are arguing, that she's done a fantastic job, but there's always room for new voices?
You know, Nancy Pelosi is as responsible as anyone for this blue wave, for making it happen. She's such an operational person, hard worker, made sure that she went to just about every state and every district and raised money, and along with Ben Ray Lujan, our DCCC chair, made this victory possible. And it's just astounding to me that anyone within the Democratic caucus at a moment of great victory and opportunity would want to unseat this wonderful woman who, as the Speaker of the House the last time, actually brought us the kind of health care that millions of Americans are benefiting from right now. And I am really disturbed that, you know, if there's another name, then let's have a vote. That's what Nancy was referring to in that clip. Come on, come to the caucus, put your name out there, and I assure you that Nancy Pelosi would overwhelmingly win and will win in the vote within the caucus.
Well, I remember the last time she said the water's warm, I think it was directed at Harold Ford Jr., and she certainly had the votes then, and she does know how to count. Let me play for you my colleague Rachel Maddow asking a question that I think dovetails with your argument, which is, if the House did so well, why is there talk about replacing Nancy Pelosi at all when the Senate Democrats didn't do as well? Take a look.
So a lot of things are sort of percolating, even boiling over all at once. Today, House Democrats made noise about the possibility of choosing someone other than Nancy Pelosi to be the Democratic leader and the Speaker of the House in the new Democratic-controlled Congress. This, of course, would be a classic Democratic Party move, right? I mean, the party loses seats in the Senate, and so they make 0 changes to their Senate leadership.
Congresswoman, would you say that if there's a change to be made, it would start with Schumer and not Pelosi?
Well, why would it be Nancy Pelosi? She has the votes. We're talking about a very small rump group within the caucus that is saying that they will deprive Nancy Pelosi of being the speaker, a position she so well deserves and has done so well, and have really not a candidate to replace her. So it's a creation of utter chaos at this moment when we want to be going ahead, and she wants to be going ahead with an agenda to bring more health care, to lower the cost of prescription drugs. She has talked about this agenda through the campaign, and even now, Nancy Pelosi is focused on what we're going to do when she is speaker and we have this majority. It's really astounding to me and very frustrating that this small group would try to take that away. And I do think that there's a bit of sexism here. You know, there's a trending hashtag 5 white guys and their effort to take this away from her when she would be the only woman at the small table with the top leaders in our country. I think that's important in and of itself.
And what specifically do you see as the sexism? The notion that she has a good record and she is being challenged in a way that Chuck Schumer, as a male Democrat, is not, or something else that you know about from within the caucus that's a concern?
You know, even age is raised. You know, with men, it seems that the older you get, the more experienced you're considered. With women, it's more like now it's time for you to move on and move out. And I resent that.
Yeah, all fair points. David Jolly, your view?
I do think it's time for a change. Look, I'm not inside the Democratic caucus. I'm no longer a Republican. I just think that after an election that was about change.
What are you at this point?
I'm an independent, and I'm just putting my analyst hat on and suggesting that I'm surprised after this election. I think there's an opportunity missed for Democrats not reaching for change. And what I mean by that is the inspiration seemed to come from Beto, it came from Gillum, it came from Abrams, and the leadership team of 10 years ago surprises me. And what I would point out is...
Let me push you on that briefly, David.
Yeah,
I'm going to push you on that.
Sure.
You just named people, though, I think, to Congresswoman Schakowsky's point, who lost. Beto didn't get the promotion. Gillum, I want to say, is still in a recount, but is not ahead. So you're naming people who got a lot of attention, but didn't win the way that Pelosi put together a winning coalition. Your rebuttal, sir.
Sure, or Ocasio-Cortez, or the 20 members that won the suburbs that said they weren't going to vote for Nancy Pelosi. Here's my point. I agree with the Congresswoman. Nancy Pelosi is an incredibly skilled tactician. She was a very successful Speaker of the House. I agree. She also, though, presided over the loss of the House in 2010 and over 8 years in the minority for Democrats. So for Democrats who have been asking for the future, asking for change, it surprises me. Look, I think Chuck Schumer, Maddow's right, probably should go. On the issue of is it because Nancy Pelosi is a woman? No, I think Mitch McConnell should go. Not because he's a man, but because I think he's a face of the past within the Republican Party. It's not that Nancy Pelosi is unqualified. Frankly, she's probably the most skilled to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. I just think it's a return for the past at a time when the Democrats and the country are asking to go forward.
But let me just say even in the years in the minority, Nancy was able to run circles around the Republicans, get appropriations bills with no poison pill riders on them. She is the best qualified, and the people who brought us to this victory in the grassroots are supporting Nancy Pelosi. They want to see her, that woman, that skilled woman, the best fighter that we have, the best progressive that we have, to be our leader. And I think some of these renegades will find that there's a price to pay within their own constituencies for challenging her, not in the way that let's have a real vote, let's have a head-to-head fight, let's have an honest, democratic, small d election. No, they want to just deprive her of it, and there is no way out for them that I can see because they don't have a candidate.
Well, strong words and a lot of passion there. We'll be watching, and Congresswoman Schakowsky and Congressman Jolly, thank you both. You've been inside that body. We appreciate your insights. I want to bring back the breaking news here with Jason Johnson and Alyssa Menendez in Broward. everything just changed in the last half hour, and everything that they just counted for those several days is not now going to be the count, Alicia.
I mean, and I would actually toss it back to you as the legal expert of the three of us. I simply took the LSAT and didn't go to law school. I mean, is this grounds for yet another legal case? There have been like several dozen at this point. Is this something that the Nelson campaign chooses to go back to the courts with?
You certainly are in a situation when you're building on a 2-minute delay, and whether that was formally uploaded and why was it processed at 3:02 or was it technically up at 2:59? There's plenty for lawyers to argue over, Jason. I think what is so striking here is we were just having a conversation 20 minutes ago about why the legitimacy of this matters and why doing it the right way matters, even if it doesn't change the outcome.
Exactly.
And everyone who's not in a Donald Trump conspiracy theory understands that Nelson has a deficit that historically is unlikely to be overcome. But having been inside there for several days and watched the machine counting and watch all this, I have to tell you the idea that this is all wiped out over a 2-minute delay is a farce and is also very Florida.
Well, yeah, I mean, Florida gonna Florida, right? And worse than that, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars of time and money have been spent throughout this state, in this region, to try and do this count and have it all get wiped away because somebody can't figure out what their watch is supposed to do on a regular basis. But I think this, and again, the long-term issue is going to be, what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen in 2020? Because I promise you, if this starts happening at a presidential level, if Rick Scott could threaten to send cops after the board of directors here at the precinct, you don't think Donald Trump wouldn't send the army to a state that he thought was somehow denying him a proper vote count? That's the implication of what we've got going on here. That 2 minutes could end up being 2 months, a lifetime in our democracy if we have similar problems down the road.
Ari, I've spent my entire life defending the great state of New Jersey, and now you are forcing me to defend the great state of Florida. You know, I think about the fact that this is also the state where we had the tragic Parkland shooting and where we saw students come forward and become national leaders on an issue that we've not seen adults be able to lead on. And I've been there, I've reported from there, and when you meet those young people and you see how excited they are to participate in our democracy, how excited they were to register to vote and to vote for the first time, it's them that we have to keep in the forefront of our mind, right? This was one of the first times that they were going to be able to participate civically in our democracy, and they deserve better than this, right?
Well, you're making such an important point for all of us to consider as we have this breaking news, and as I've been telling viewers, Broward County now not going to count the tally from the recount because it was submitted technically 2 minutes late. That's brand new. But to widen out to what you're saying, when I say Florida, that's shorthand for the Florida elections officials and the policy choices made by individuals, including, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Republican Governor Rick Scott, who oversees all of this and is the chief executive. Because this is also a state that had historically high turnout, over 8 million, which is in a midterm year, which shows civic engagement, which also had a bipartisan coalition, Alicia, to restore voting rights to ex-convicts, which is going to change the entire outcome, potentially, or at least the entire voting population in 2020. So there's a lot of things that are happening that are progress here, even as these officials seem to keep mucking it up.
Right, 1.4 million new voters in Florida. And when I think back to those young people, one of the leaders of March for Our Lives said to me, our politics is not built to match the speed and ferocity of my generation. And I'm thinking of her a lot today as we see that our actual machinery is not equipped to match the speed and ferocity of that generation. They have 2 years to pull their act together. You know, after what happened in 2000, the Supreme Court made Florida build standards for how these ballots would be evaluated, right? So that you would understand which colorings were light and too dark and what would count and what wouldn't count. Clearly, there are bigger issues, and those issues are infrastructure issues. They're also personnel issues, and the clock is ticking now.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.